Hello and welcome to the Fantasy Life Show, Week 13 game-by-game recap edition. I'm your host, Ian Hartitz. It is a great night to be great. It's a great night to break down 15 separate games of action. We had the Thanksgiving Day fireworks. We have Bucky Irving return to action. Devon Achane and Bijan Robinson doing Devon Achane and Bijan Robinson things. Jackson Smith, and Jigba and Justin Jefferson combining for a whopping 27 yards. All that and so much more here on today's show. But as always on this lovely Sunday evening, I am joined by the one, the only Dwain, the Rock McFarland. What's up, Dwain?
What's up, Ian? I thought that was a pretty good slip up. Justin Jackson Jefferson. Yeah, it was bad. It was bad for both. So, it's with JSN, it was bound to happen eventually. I know he's been like invincible, but just keeps on happening to Justin Jefferson. And it can actually get worse than JJ McCarthy. So there is that.
Things can always get worse. Sometimes we just learn some great lessons from fantasy football as well, and that certainly is one of them. So, again, a lot to get to. Accordingly, guys, we are going to be kind of rushing through the Thursday and Friday game. I imagine that you guys have had plenty of time to watch those, see all the stats and stuff already. So, with that said, Dwayne, let's get right after it with the Packers taking down the Lions 31-24. Green Bay winning outright as 3-point dogs. Congrats. The over cash at 48.5. So, as special of just a performance and just yearly spectacle that Toyotathon Jordan Love is, with 4 more touchdowns through the air to Dontavian Wicks, and also a big game for Christian Watson. Let's face it, Dwayne, it really was the big news being Amon-Ra St. Brown suffering a low ankle sprain. So again, hopefully not going to see him out of the picture for too long, but on a quick turnaround against the Cowboys coming up on Thursday Night Football, we could see this Lions offense, unfortunately, without our one true sun god. What do we see from the usage with Amon-Ra St. Brown sidelined?
Yeah, man. Jamison Williams posted a 90 utilization score, 26.9 PPR points, 97% route participation. He had a 40% target share, so 10 targets on the day, 82% of the team's air yards, 82 air yards. So, look, I think he's a high-end wide receiver 2, borderline wide receiver 1 in games without, Amon-Ra St. Brown. We're already dealing with not having Sam Laporta. So where would you put him? We were already flirting with low end wide receiver 2, mid range wide receiver 2 before the donut last week, and now we've got a potential game without Amon-Ra St. Brown and an offense that has Jared Goff. We still like it, obviously down some weapons.
You go back to week 6 or week 7, whenever he kind of started having these good games, and even including the 2 goose eggs in that span, Dwayne, we've still seen him put forward near borderline wide receiver 1 numbers. So I'm with you, man. I think on especially a week 14 slate where we have 4 teams on bye. I'm looking at our rankings from last week, and we had guys like Chris Olave, Lad McConkey, Emeka Ibuka around that wide receiver 1 borderline. Why not have Jamison Williams there?
Yeah, I agree. I think J-Mo moves up. The other guy that moves up, not obviously near as much, but it is Isaac Tesla. 47 utilization score. So not great, guys, but he gave you 11.5 PPR points. The big thing is 94% route participation rate. So it was him and J-Mo out there in the 2 wide receiver sets. And then you had Tom Kennedy, not related to JFK, I believe, but he was the guy that was actually out there running as the 3rd wide receiver, because Khalif Raymond was also out for this game. So the Lions, man, all types of banged up for this one. Only an 8% target share for Tesla, but we know he can be that downfield, kind of demon. Ian, 17.5 ADOT in this game. So boom bust wide receiver 5. If we don't have Amon-Ra St. Brown, that's about where I would put Isaac Tesla.
Tesla has certainly made the most of his opportunities, even dating back to the preseason. Should have some of the fantasy-friendly variety against the Cowboys defense that, yes, has improved, but also still quite susceptible to good opposing passing attacks. Also note the Packers are going to be facing the first-place Chicago Bears here in Week 14. Get your popcorn ready for that showdown. Moving right along, we had the Cowboys take down the Chiefs 31-28. Cowboys winning outright as 3.5-point dogs. The over did cash at 53.5. Dwayne, as awesome as it was seeing Dak Prescott, CeeDee Lamb, and George Pickens put up big time numbers, I think the most fantasy relevant thing here was Kareem Hunt maintaining a stranglehold on this backfield, even with Isaiah Pacheco back in action.
Yeah, only 9 fantasy points, but man, had 67% of the snaps, 70% of the rushing attempts, 57% route participation, and a 6% target share. It was just the first game back for Pacheco, who's kind of been trying to come back and maybe has had some setbacks along the way. We don't know for sure. So it could be something that we see evolve over the next few games. But as of right now, Kareem Hunt, like when I go to project it for next week, I'm going to have him as the running back 1. I did it this week. I'll be willing to do it again next week. I think that Isaiah Pacheco obviously still has a role, but right now Hunt is the better player. He's also the guy that gets the carries inside the 5-yard line. Yeah, which, let's be honest, that's the most important role for the Chiefs out of the backfield is that. It's not like they're targeting their backs that much. They're throwing the ball to Rashee Rice. They're throwing the ball to Travis Kelce. We wish they were throwing the ball more to Xavier Worthy, but guys, beggars can't be choosers.
Speaking of Rashee Rice, another 2 touchdowns on the day. And now with 21.8 PPR points and the unfortunate dub from Jackson Smith and the Jigba, Rashee Rice is your wide receiver 1 in fantasy and PPR points per game. Moving on to Thursday night. For those who were still awake after eating some turkey to catch the Bengals taking down the Ravens 32-14, Cincy winning outright at 7.5-point dogs. A theme of, our island games here on Thursday and Friday. The under did cash in this one, though, at 52.5. So again, it was great seeing Joe Burrow back. He had a couple maybe misfires early, but man, by halftime, this dude was on the same page, particularly with Jamar Chase, 110 yards on the day. Could have been a really big one for Mitchell Tinsley as well, just for one reason or another on a lot of these passes. Couldn't quite haul them in. Wound up with one of the higher unrealized air yards totals of the week. But of course, T. Higgins will be back for the Bengals next week in a one. Actually, they might have flexed this one, but it's going to be a great game either way. Bengals, Bills, and Buffalo. So get ready for that one. All that said, Dwayne, the big usage concern here was a reduced role for Chase Brown. No, didn't exactly impact him in the box score, still at 22 touches and 18.3 PPR points. But when Samaje Perine is active, man, we do see him starting to carve out a chunk of this role.
Yeah, for sure. Here's the thing. The Bengals ran 80 plays, so it kind of masks this for Chase Brown. And again, guys, we're not saying Chase Brown is like some guy you're not going to be able to use in fantasy. But listen to this. Snaps in weeks 9 through 12 when we didn't have Samaje Perine, 89%. Week 13 with Perine back down to 59%. Still a strong number. That can be a running back 1, but more often that's like mid-range running back 2 territory. Attempts weeks 9 through 12, 83%. Week 13, that dropped to 50%. That's a massive blow. You lost half the carries, and that's closer to what it looked like before, for about a 4-game stretch before Perine got hurt. If you remember, it was like Brown had basically all the backfield early in the year, guys. Wasn't very efficient. They started giving the ball to Samaje Perine to spell him. It was not quite a 1A, 1B, but it was a lot closer than what people would have ever expected it to be this year. Then you look at route participation rate, 82% in weeks 9 through 12. That fell to 62%. That's slightly better than what we saw before the Perine injury, just because he kept the 2-minute offense in this game. He had the majority of those snaps. And so his target share didn't fall off terribly, but it fell from 21% over the last 3 games down to 16%. So on the surface, I know the counting stats or even the counting underlying data, and you look at the attempts, you look at the targets, it doesn't matter. It's really fine. That's because there were 80 plays in the game. Okay. The Bengals on average run 62 to 64. They're not going to run 80 plays every week. Might they run 80 plays next week? We don't know. It can happen. They could have another big game like this. But the big takeaway is the Chase Brown, we have to downgrade him. We had been putting him in running back 1 territory. I will not rank him as a top 12 running back next week. We'll see. We got 4 teams on bye. Yeah. But he's really more of a mid-range running back 2, high-end running back 2. And again, things could shift back. But the biggest concern for me, Ian, is this pattern really matches what we saw before in about a 4 or 5 game stretch with Perine. So it's not like it was just one game out of nowhere. This is what we saw before the injury.
Does have the decent enough matchup, against the Bills. Obviously played a little bit better, if you will. Obviously it's shutting down Jalen Warren and company today, but still a spot where Chase Brown should be in lineups of most shapes and sizes. Again, regardless of the reduced usage, not ideal there, though. Meanwhile, with the Ravens, guys, again, it sucks having to look at Lamar Jackson's crappy box score totals the entire weekend. If you stayed up for this game on Thanksgiving night, it was not ideal. That said, we had a lot of shishy stuff going on here, okay? We had Lamar Jackson, first of all, have a fumble that really just did seem like a forward pass. We also had Isaiah Likely go on his way to scoring a touchdown, lose a fumble through the goal line, nullifying one for Lamar. We also had Isaiah Flower, 36-yard touchdown, nullified on what I thought was a pretty ticky-tack OPI, and I say that as a very biased Zay Flowers truther. And then also we had Devontae Walker dropping not 1, but 2 potential 40-plus yard gains that, again, went right through his hands. So, yes, Dwayne, I'm picking, 3 or 4 plays here, but that's legit 3 touchdowns that could have gone to Lamar, or at least 2 and a bunch more. So I'm not saying we shouldn't downgrade Lamar. Okay. He has not played up to that top 5 standing. I know it's been quite some time since he's even scored a freaking touchdown at this point. He's not running as much as we wish he would. And we know he is playing a little bit banged up, but we need to add that context to the performance. That's fair.
Yeah, no, I think it's great, that you point out all of those plays. I think what makes it so hard for people is just how bad Lamar's been over the last month. right? And getting multiple performances in a row of under 10 fantasy points. Like you think you would never get that. You feel like Lamar Jackson, if I have him, I'm immune to that kind of performance. Unfortunately, right now, you're not. It's in the range of outcomes. It's new territory for Lamar. So hopefully he gets healthy. The Ravens offense gets healthy and things start cooking. But I mean, they're really trying to lean into the ground. And this is a game where they had to throw it some, Ian. They fell behind, and that really changed the game script. But they've been trying to really lean in the run, even with all these injuries, or even with the game script going the way it went. Like they still really refuse to try to use a bunch of these wide receivers. They want to use a fullback, the 2 tight ends, all that kind of stuff. So it's part of it's Lamar, but part of it I think is the way they're playing. But it could go hand in hand. The coaching staff may know that Lamar's really hurt, and that's why they're trying to play this way.
So yeah, imagine won't be having Lamar, inside our top 3 or 4 quarterbacks like normal, but I also don't think we're exactly going to be ranking him QB 16 ahead of next week's AFC North matchup against the Steelers. Finally, guys, on Friday we had the Bears take down the Eagles 24-15. Chicago again winning outright as a 7-point dog. The under cashed at 43.5. So for the first place Chicago Bears, Dwain, which continues to be wild to say out loud. Yes, we have some inconsistencies going on in the passing game. Caleb Williams continues to flash, multiple times per week. I continue to think very highly of him in the long term, but let's face it, we haven't seen Luther Burden exactly boom in the second half. We've seen Roma Dunze fall off a cliff. DJ Moore, Colson Loveland, good players, obviously a bit up and down. This run game, though, has been the one steady force here. Both Kyle Monangai and DeAndre Swift north of 125 rushing yards. Each of them scored a touchdown against a run D, Dwayne, that was supposed to be pretty darn good in the Eagles. So just talk about, again, this split between 2 running backs and whether they can both just keep on keeping on.
Well, number one, what you mentioned about the Bears, and how much they're running the ball since the week 5 bye week. So from coming out of that, they really kind of changed the identity of their offense as far as how often they wanted to run the ball. So from week 6 through week 13, we've got a -5% drop back rate over expected. So that's one of the more run heavy teams in the NFL. And then they've been splitting the backfield up a little bit more. Now it's mostly been DeAndre Swift leading the way in healthy games until last week when he fumbled. You guys probably heard us talk about that. And that really gave Kyle Monangai a chance to kind of step in, take over for the rest of that game. We weren't for sure what was going to happen coming into this week. Well, it was more of a 1A, 1B situation here at Ian. It was still Swift leading the way in snaps, 54%, but Monangai got to 45%. Rushing attempts went to Monangai, 50% versus 41%. Target share, 3% to each. Still an edge to DeAndre Swift in the route participation department at 57% versus 33%. So really, Monangai getting a little bit more of the groundwork. Snaps are really close. More of the passing down work going to Swift. It was fine in this game. Swift gave you 20.8 PPR points, and then Monangai gave you 19 fantasy points in this one. So you know how it goes, though. If you get in a game, and because we've dealt with this with the Seattle backs all year, and we don't get 21 and 19 fantasy points per game out of these guys. Now, maybe you want to argue that the Bears are just a better offense. They do run more plays, than the Seattle Seahawks offense. So there are some small differences here, but you know how it goes. You get in these situations, you really need good game scripts for both guys to come through. Usually somebody gets left out. Somebody's in RB2 land, then somebody's stuck in RB3 land. We have a week here where they're both in running back 1 territory. That's going to be tough to sustain.
So again, Bears are going to be in Lambeau next week. Get your popcorn ready for that one. I would not necessarily bet on both these running backs, again, having such big performances, but certainly going to be ranking Swift and Monangai closer than ever ahead of that one. Over with the Eagles, they'll be taking on the maybe Justin Herbert-less Chargers on Monday Night Football. More on that injury later. And again, really was another nice big game for A.J. Brown. Caught 10 passes for 132 yards and not 1, but 2 touchdowns on the afternoon. But unfortunately for everyone else, just couldn't quite get things going. Only 20 minutes and 42 seconds time of possession. But I will say, Dwain, it's funny just how bad of a performance, like everyone, can agree that A.J. Brown has been this year. He's now the wide receiver 12 in PPR points per game. Life comes at you fast, man.
Yeah, man. Look, he's a good player, and that's why honestly, we try not to overreact to this stuff, but it had been such a large sample with AJ Brown. But over the last 4 games, man, he's got an 88 utilization score, guys. That's on a scale of 0 to 100 for a receiver, and 88 is really good. It's really an A territory. 18.9 fantasy points per game over that stretch, 93% routes, which has not been a problem. That's been there all year. 33% target share, so 9.3 targets per game with 102 air yards per game. So yeah, AJB looking really good. Hopefully he can just keep it up, Ian. We know he's a good enough player to do it. It comes down to, do the Eagles get in games where they just want to run the ball? Do they just, throw the ball a little bit more, but it's more spread out across Devontae Smith as well as Dallas Goedert? Like, there's still a lot of the challenges that have been there for AJB all year are still there. Like, he's just really on a hot streak right now, and they're throwing the ball a little bit more.
And I understand a lot of teams that drafted A.J. Brown maybe aren't in a position with team-wide success to even be benefiting that much from these late season booms. But again, just I would say the big verdict here, A.J. Brown remains very good at football when they do, in fact, decide to throw him the ball. Moving on to our regularly scheduled programming, kicking things off here on Sunday, we had the Dolphins take down the Saints 21-17. New Orleans did cover, though, as 5.5-point dogs, the under cashed at 42. So winners write the history book. So we will start with the Dolphins and a pretty underwhelming, and I would even say disappointing performance from Tua Tagovailoa and the passing game. 157 scoreless yards from Tua. One bad kind of heat check sort of interception after a turnover thrown deep to Jalen Waddle. And yeah, just overall wasn't a good game there. The good news was Devon Achane picked up slack on the ground, 134 yards and a touchdown. Could have even had a second score on a short screen pass. Unfortunately, again, Tua was not on his game. So unfortunate dud from Jalen Waddle, just 40 scoreless yards. So I would like to think, Dwayne, that we'll see better performances from Tua and Waddle, particularly next week against a Jets defense that Waddle always seems to kill. The good news, though, we did see the return of Darren Waller from that pec injury. Did he have a full-time role, Dwayne, or do we see him kind of eased in like he originally was earlier in the season as well?
Not quite full time, but I mean, it was strong. 71% route participation rate. Like, we like it when the guys get to 80, but man, 71 first game back. And honestly, he started the game off hot, like right away. He had the 2 targets and there 2 receptions for 24 yards, something around there. And then just kind of slowed down the rest of the game. But 6.7 PPR points today at a 15% target share, which was 3 targets. But yeah, I think, looking at Waller, he'll be one of these guys that'll be a borderline tight end 1, high end tight end 2, somewhere in there. And you're right on Waddle. Like, he didn't come through today, guys, but 30% target share. He's still their leader. They didn't have to throw the ball that much today the way this game really went. I know it was still close late in the game, but they got up by over 8 points pretty early, and it stayed that way for a while.
Waller, man, I know borderline tight end 1 more weeks than not, but he is going to have just one good matchup after another down the stretch. I want to say the Dolphins had the best fantasy playoff schedule at the tight end position. Jets, Steelers, Bengals in week 16, guys, and then also the Bucs in week 17. Maybe a situation where he does find himself right up there with the Rondé Gadsons of the world again in that mid-tier tight end 1 conversation. Meanwhile, over for the Saints, Tyler Shuck, 239 yards and a pair of touchdowns through the air. Things got feisty there at the end, man. A big reason for that was the performance of Devon Vele, caught all 8 of his targets for 93 yards and a touchdown. Also recovered the onside kick at the end to help give the Fighting Cooter Doodles a legit chance of pulling the upset. Unfortunately, wasn't to be. So we did have Chris Olave have 47 yards in the score. So again, yeah, we had 4 sacks from Shuck. He also had an interception that was bad and he lost a fumble, but at least proving capable of flirting with 250 or so passing yards per game. Something I'm sure a lot of fans wearing purple up there in Minnesota wish they could say the same about. That said, Dwayne, the big news here was no Alvin Kamara. Did we actually end up seeing a full-time role for Devin Neal, or was last week a little bit of Fugazi?
No, his role this week was actually better. They didn't use Taysom Hill. They didn't try to give all the rushing attempts to Taysom Hill. Devin Hill only gave you 9.9 PPR points, but 81% of the snaps today, Ian, 58% of the rushing attempts. He had 14 carries, 71% route participation, and he had a 9% target share. So he had 3 targets on the day. So we'll see what's going on with Kamara with the MCL sprain. I just don't see a reason for them to want to rush him back. But, like you said, Bill Parcells says that football players play football in football season if they are healthy enough to play. So we'll see what happens there with Kamara. It was Evan Hull also as the running back too, not Audric Estime.
Interesting. Such a great quote from an all-time great coach, by the way. I just love the Bill Parcells-isms, if you will, over the years, always applies seemingly, even, when he's been done coaching for a while. Moving right along with the Texans take down the Colts 20-16. Houston winning outright as 3-point dogs, the under cashed here at 44.5. First game back from C.J. Stroud. Obviously missed a few weeks there with that concussion. Didn't seem any worse for the wear. 276 yards through the air on 22 of 35 passing, 10.8 yard average target depth. He was an ethical gunslinger out there, tossing that rock downfield, mostly to Nico Collins, who had a team high 98 yards on 10 targets. Also chipped in a rushing score, which was good to see, I should say. Also could have been even bigger, had a week high 123 unrealized air yards in this one. So good performance from Dalton Schultz as well. Caught 7 of 8 targets for 55 yards. That said, Dwayne, it was just sadly another inefficient one from Woody Marks. He was dealing with a foot injury early on. Seems like every single week this dude misses at least a few plays with one ailment moment or another. Unfortunately, did lose out on the goal line touchdown to Nick Chubb. So still seemed like Marks had, a good enough utilization, but unfortunately going to be tough to upgrade him really after another bad performance.
Yeah, I mean, he was still the running back one. I mean, 7.7 PPR points. Woody Marks is just doesn't seem like he's very good, Ian. I mean, that's all we can really say at this point. Now, to be fair to him, like the Texans' offensive line's terrible. So anyway, we were never coming out saying Woody Marks is a superstar. We were just saying, hey, if he gets the volume, we know that fantasy points can follow. That just hasn't been the case. Having said that, I mean, 56% of the snaps, 58% of the rushing attempts. He had 19 carries today. Like he's going to eventually run into fantasy points. Like you just can't push him up the ranks. Like you just have to leave him as a low end running back too. But he can give you like a Kamani Vidal day, like what we got today from him. Like Woody Marks has a 20-point fantasy point game coming. I promise. I just can't tell you when, Ian. It could be after another 8-pointer next week, and that's the problem. Oh, one note on the pass catchers. Jaden Higgins, the rookie out of Iowa State, did continue to look good. 11.5 PPR points today. But here's the bigger thing: over the last 4 games, averaging 12.5 fantasy points per game. His route participation rate continues to move up. Now, guys, he is still in the rotation. He's in the 60%, 60 to 65% range over the last couple of games. But man, over the last 4 games, since really moving more into a not quite full-time role, but full-time-esque, we'll call it, 2.04 yards per route run. So Higgins, another player that's just looking good. And that's good for the Texans, man, who are they're winning games, man. They're up to 7-5 right now. The Colts are losing. You got the Jaguars in first place. The AFC South is up for grabs.
Got the Chiefs next week on Sunday Night Football. Not exactly a layup spot there. That said, Cardinals and the Raiders over those next 2 weeks. Perhaps we see Jaden Higgins supply some fantasy playoff fireworks. Meanwhile, for the Colts, just 3 for 10 on third down and only had a 25-minute time possession. So it wasn't their best day at the office. That said, we've seen this Houston Texans defense cause a lot worse afternoons out there. And I honestly was surprised that Daniel Jones was capable enough to win. It was a rough start. He took a sack. Obviously, we've gotten word about him playing through multiple, fractured bones there in his leg, which sounds pretty painful to have to go through. Again, didn't start off well, but wound up recovering okay enough to throw for 201 yards and a pair of touchdowns, one of which was to Alec Pierce, the other one to Tyler Warren. So really was just another impressive game from Alec Pierce. 4 catches, 78 yards, also drew a 32-yard defensive pass interference penalty. And at this point, Dwain, I know Michael Pittman was awesome the first couple months of the year, but I think Alec Pierce needs to be ranked as number 1 wide receiver in Indy right now.
Well, I think it's at least you can't call Pittman the clear wide receiver 1 in Indy. I mean, look, Pierce over the last 4 games, man, 14.3 fantasy points per game, 94% route participation, 21% target share. That's 6.8 per game. And he's got a 2.08 yards per route run. And the big thing with Pierce is that he's not just even though he's getting a lot of air yards still, he's not just running go routes. Like he's out here running these dig routes, these comeback routes. Like his dig route, man, I was watching some of his film over the, a couple of, not last week, but the week before. And I was seeing it. And then I was seeing it again today, watching Red Zone. I was like, man, like people just respect that deep speed so much. Like when he breaks that route off, and they use a lot of play action, which pulls the linebacker down, like he's just operating in really good space. So major hat tip to the Colts coaching staff for the way that they're using him. And also, just to Pierce for just, evolving into a new area of his game, no longer just a deep threat.
And again, not saying Pittman won't get his, and Josh Downs was out there making multiple diving catches, one of which got called back on a hold, unfortunately. So always going to be a little bit of this crowded room, only one football to go around factor. But again, Pierce very much earning his flowers this season as well. And also, I know Jonathan Taylor at managers has been 2 weeks without finding the end zone, but you're still in a pretty good spot when Jonathan Taylor has 121 scoreless yards, and you're like, oh my gosh, like what happened out there? So better days should be ahead. Hopefully,
1 point
next
week.
We'll take it. That's what I'm saying. Exactly. So similar sentiment with Tyler Warren. My last question here, Dwain, was, did we see his usual role despite having, the flu game factor coming in?
Yeah, 82% routes. Targets were down a little bit at 16%, but he caught the touchdown to save the day. 11.2 PPR points for Tyler Warren.
Love seeing that. Otherwise, only thing to keep an eye on, guys, is Colts number 1 cornerback Sauce Gardner with a calf strain. No Achilles. It looked pretty bad at first, so relatively good news there. He is expected to miss a couple of weeks, though, per Jordan Schultz. So the Colts have actually run the most man coverage in the league since acquiring Sauce Gardner. Could be a nice little upgrade for Brian Thomas Jr. and company ahead of next week's AFC South clash. Moving right along, we had the Jets take down the Falcons 27-24. Jets winning outright as 3-point dogs. The over cashing at 38.5. The artist form formerly known as Ty God, going out there and doing his thing, 172 yards and a beautiful touchdown to A.D. Mitchell. Tyrod also ran in for a touchdown later in the game, so good stuff there. But let's face it, Dwayne, it is Adonai Mitchell. I know that we have, 20 games of evidence saying that this dude isn't a very good professional wide receiver, but I think these 60 minutes of football today, Dwayne, just completely proved once and for all that you and me were just so right for believing in this guy. Just whenever you can go out and have 102 yards against the Falcons, to me, that just proves once and for all that you were awesome at the game of football. So all joking around aside, it was cool to see. A.D. Mitchell, hell yeah, man.
Look, I mean, and I think the thing is we don't have 20 games saying that A.D. Mitchell's not very good. Like, he's really always been in a part-time role. He's had a couple of games where he had the full-time role, and he's done some dumb things. And that's what sticks out in people's heads, whenever you drop the football before you cross the goal line. But you had to be good enough to be in a position to cross the goal line. And A.D. Mitchell was there. And he can be a maddening player. He needs to be more consistent, guys. But, man, he really has big-time traits. And that was the thing on him coming out of college, Ian. It was his exact thing, that he's like an enigma, because it's like and you see the flashes of what he can do, but can he ever really tie everything all together and, just keep it running? But with Mitchell today, 24.2 PPR points, 98% route participation, a 39% target share, guys, 12 targets, 173 air yards. So we talked about him last week having the targets and the air yards, but the catches didn't work out, and that he could be, a boom bust wide receiver 4. Well, this is a boom, and we have to upgrade him, man. Look, Garrett Wilson's he's eligible to return in week 15. So we'll have to see what happens with that, Ian. My gut says with Aaron Glenn, Garrett Wilson's going to play. Just hearing Aaron Glenn talk and the way that he is as a coach, I have a feeling that Garrett Wilson's going to play. So it'll be interesting to see what happens, but we have at least one more game, right, before that's going to occur. So I think A.D. Mitchell's right there in that wide receiver 3 conversation, man. I mean, 2 weeks in a row of air yards like this, there's just major boom potential.
He's going to crack that top 36, I think, especially in a week there with 4 teams on bye. Yeah. So good stuff from Mitchell. I'm going to be a winnable enough matchup next week there against the Dolphins. Otherwise, John Mechie had 8 targets, which is pretty darn good out there. Unfortunately, he did drop 3 of them, which can help explain the mediocre day at the office. Also, shout out to Breece Hall, 76 yards and a short touchdown run for good measure there. Meanwhile, with the Falcons, 234 yards and a touchdown through the air for Kirk Cousins. He found David Sells for the second time in as many weeks. Unfortunately, Darnell Mooney could not keep the good times rolling, just 25 scoreless yards on the afternoon. Nice game from Kyle Pitts, though, caught 7 of 8 targets for 82 yards. However, it was John Robinson really making plays on the day, 142 yards on the ground and a touchdown. Also chipped in 51 receiving yards. A hack, Dwayne, that you have found is just simply taking Bijan's receiving over every single week. So far, so good.
It's a big hack, man. The market's just not adjusted to how often they use him in the passing game. And then I think these last couple of weeks, people will be like, Kirk Cousins isn't going to throw to the running back. I'm like, well, they're scheming a ton of stuff up for Bijan. And last week he would have hit it too, man. But one of the passes counted as a run because it was behind the line of scrimmage. And that was like a 30-yarder. So, Bijan, just bet the receiving over, guys, every week. Hey, Ian, real quick. The only other takeaway I have, and you can take the rest of this, is still back over on the Jets. And you covered it with Mechie, but another really good performance. I know the drops were there, but man, a 26% target share. You pair that with what he did last week. It's really Mechie and A.D. Mitchell. Again, we'll have to see what happens when Garrett Wilson comes back. But if you guys are in deeper leagues and Mechie is there, but A.D. Mitchell's gone, I would still be stashing him. He's played well.
Last thing I had for the Falcons was just, guys, lay off Tyler Algier a little bit. I know he vultured away a touchdown, but Bijan got a chance. He got stopped at the 1-yard line. They brought in Algier, and he scored when we're still getting 8 touches for Bijan in this game. Chill, okay? This is not Kenneth Walker, Zach Charbonnet situation. Algier just gets one every now and again. So going to be the Falcons against those Seahawks. Speaking of the devil, next week could be a little bit tougher sledding for all parties involved in that one. Moving right along, we had the 49ers take down the Browns 26-8. San Fran covering us 5.5-point road favorites, I should say, with easy undercash here at 35.5. So Brock Purdy, Dwain went out there 168 yards and a touchdown through the air. Also ran in for a touchdown. Generally just seemed to be a bit more healthy. No, it wasn't like it was a game, honestly, with the weather conditions where they even wanted to be throwing the ball downfield, but still had a nice connection with Juwan Jennings. Caught 4 of his 6 targets for 39 yards and a score as well. So 49ers are going to be on a bye next week. Hopefully that bye is what they need, Dwayne, just to get Brock that much closer to 100%. Because Lord knows, man, combined with their bad defense, I do think we can see some fireworks in this passing game weeks 15 through 17 if Purdy is healthy enough to just be Brock Purdy.
Yeah, man, and a lot to play for. They're 9-4. The 49ers have had a very favorable schedule, but they've taken advantage of it, and they've put themselves into a really good position with the Rams losing today. I mean, things are really tightening up in the AFC West, so or in the NFC West. But if you look at the big takeaway on this one for me, yes, with you, Purdy, let's give him the bye week, get him healthy, bring him back. Let's see if we can get what we've seen over the last 2 years from him. But Juwan Jennings, guys, I just want to say, it's a solid 4-game streak since he's been healthier and also hated. Like, people hate Juwan Jennings. If you see all the stuff on social media, man, I don't know what this guy's doing or what he's saying to other players' wives. I don't know the whole story there. But what I can say about Juwan Jennings is over the last 4 games, Ian, 13.9 fantasy points per game, 89% route participation, 24% target share. That's 4.75 targets per game, 1.75 yards per route run. So very squarely in that wide receiver 3 territory. And, honestly, right now, just outplaying Ricky Pearsall. So it's really Kittle, Jennings, and CMC. We'll see if Pearsall's still just not quite 100%, but really has done nothing since he has been back in the lineup over these last few weeks.
Maybe Ayuk gets back. I don't know, man. I feel like that ship has
I
kind of
doubt it.
sailed. I would doubt it as well. So
Ayuk just being a goofball. Yeah.
Last thing, guys. McCaffrey continuing to do his thing out there. Obviously, wasn't the most efficient day, but that tends to happen when you're facing off against Myles Garrett and that ferocious Browns front seven. But if we do see Brian Robinson drop during this bye week, and may end up being for not, and Christian McCaffrey does his thing, just realize again, one injury away from B-Rob being the waiver wire pickup of the week, and honestly just being someone that, again, could be an immediate top 15 option in the fantasy streets. Otherwise, yeah, Kittle, 67 yards, and I mentioned that schedule, guys. Titans, Colts, and Bears here after the bye, so get healthy, San Fran. Otherwise, with the Browns, Dwain, do you have something real controversial you want to say about Shedeur Sanders?
I don't have anything I want to say that's controversial. I thought he made a good comment, at the coaching or at the podium after the game. And a reporter was really trying to bait him into saying something bad about Kevin Stefanski, and he didn't. Like, he's like, no, man, I'm not saying anything bad about my coach. He's like, and that's a rude question. Yeah, sure, it was a rude question.
I get so tired of these guys trying to egg on these players just again to say something, and then they'll be the same ones that go back along and criticize the man for saying whatever you want him to say with your dang leading question in the first place. So yeah, look, wasn't a great performance there. Touchdown was of the wide open variety to Harold Fannin. Also, his second career NFL start in bad weather conditions. So, continues to want to throw the ball downfield. I'll say this, Dwain. I mean, I think Shedeur Sanders is better than Dylan Gabriel.
I do too. He pushes the ball down the field. And again, we said it on the show last week. It's better for what the Browns want to do on offense. Pound the rock with Quinshon Judkins, use the tight ends, use these heavy formations and stuff, and then try to get the ball vertical. He gives them a better chance to do that than Dylan Gabriel.
So again, Kevin Stefanski did say that he will be starting in week 14. Browns are going to be hosting the Titans then. So maybe, just maybe, Shedeur can get win number 2 in that one. Mentioned Quinshon Judkins. Actually had a nice little performance here. 109 total yards. Didn't find the end zone, but just 23 carries for 91 yards. Yes, the 49ers defense has been much worse ever since losing Fred Warner amongst many other starters in that front seven. But again, it had been since I think week 5 that Judkins had even averaged more than 3.5 yards per carry. So good seeing him move in the right direction there. Otherwise, I think the only other big note we have was Harold Fannin. Yes, again, the touchdown was of the wide open variety, ran it out and up, and we didn't see the linebacker basically carry him deep, but it did seem like he actually had a more pronounced role on a down-by-down basis.
Yeah, 93% route participation rate today. So, and then last week we saw him really separate from Njoku. It wasn't to this level, but 22% target share that led the team. Not necessarily a surprise, guys. You know that Fannon's been leading the team in targets per route run besides Dylan, Sampson, who does his thing. But he's just going to be a superstar, Ian. Like, if Harold Fannin, if they can get this offense turned around, they figure out the quarterback thing, whether it's somebody on the roster now or it's someone else that they have to get, and they just kind of clean house here and let Harold Fannin be a full-time player. If Harold Fannin was a full-time tight end playing with a good quarterback, how high would you rank him next year?
Dude, top 5. I have no doubt.
I'm with you. I think this guy, he's a beast. He's going to be a superstar.
I saw a really funny quote. I was just trying to find out who said it on the Browns, but they were basically saying, I think it was one of the linemen where their coach was like, when Harold Fannin has the ball, you might think he's going to get tackled, but he probably won't be. So just keep blocking out there. It is one of my to-do things for the next couple of days, Dwain, just to make sure I put together a little highlight reel of Fannin breaking tackles, because it really does stick out at the tight end position. And that is why, again, I want to be so high in this dude moving forward, maybe even as soon as the end of this season. Otherwise, Dylan Sampson calf injury, keep an eye out there. And Malik Collins, the Browns defensive tackle, also had a quad issue and got carted off. He's had a nice season alongside Myles Garrett, who continues his quest. I do believe he had another sack today in trying to break TJ Watt and Michael Strahan's single season sack record. So best of luck to Mr. Garrett. Now, guys, it's time for the Xfinity Game of the Week, brought to you by Xfinity. Imagine all your football all in one place. Easy. Xfinity, imagine that. The Panthers took down the Rams. That's right, you heard me. The Panthers beat the Rams 31-28. Carolina winning outright as 10-point dogs, over even cashing at 45. So the Panthers are now 7-6 this season with a minus 50-point differential. And they have a 30-0 win over the Falcons in there. So I know they had the Dalton game against the Bills and stuff, but it's just crazy to me, man. So kudos to Bryce Young company for obviously playing at their best when the lights have been shining brightest. And they're in a position now to make the playoffs, which again is absolutely crazy to think about. So speaking of Bryce, 206 yards and 3 touchdowns through the air. Yeah, the first one was, a swing pass to Chuba Hubbard that he managed to turn up. But the second two, Dwain, were absolutely awesome. He hit Jalen Coker down the sideline and Tedderell McMillan deep down the middle, both on 4th down. So again, clutch gene Bryce Young. I absolutely love it. Has he had more bad performances than good performances this year, in my humble opinion? Yeah, but this was a good one. So awesome job by Bryce Young. It's just, I guess, an unfortunate thing, Dwain, where in a game like this, only had 20 pass attempts. And unfortunately, as much as that one touchdown for Tedderell McMillan was nice, we just need to see a little bit more volume before we can completely treat him as the fantasy wide receiver one that we know he's capable of being.
Yeah, I mean, look, here's the thing with Bryce Young. Like, guys, we want him to be successful. Like, we don't want for anyone to be bad. All we're saying is, like, when you look at the larger sample of Bryce Young, whether you just want to look at this year, you want to look at the last 2 years, you look at the last 3 years, doesn't really matter what sample you want to look at. It's not good. Like, we have way more bad games than good games. Now, the positives I'll give him here, Ian, is something that we've talked about. Like, we've said, hey, man, with this ground game and with this offensive line, now they've been a little bit banged up lately, but it really feels like he should be able to push the ball vertical more. It feels like they should be able to use play action pass and do some of these things to hit shots down the field. And it just hasn't been there, man. His yards per attempt have been terrible all season. Today was a really good day. Only 203 passing yards, but 10.3 yards per attempt. And he ends up with the 3 touchdowns. You mentioned the 2 really good passes down the field. Having said all that, am I going to change Bryce Young's projection next week? No. I'm not. I'm sorry, guys. Like, I mean, my job is to like give you guys projections that if you want to gamble on them, whatever you want to do with them, you want to pick your fantasy starting lineup. It doesn't matter. I'm just trying to do the best that we can do. I'm not giving Bryce Young any more passing yards next week. I'm going to project him just the same way. He's had 3 good games all season, right? And 2 of them have been in the last 3 weeks. Now, if he has another good game next week, you know how much I'm going to move him? I'll move him up like 5 yards. Like, I mean, the way this stuff works, like you just have to lean into some of your larger samples. So it's tough. Now, does that mean that he can't like all of a sudden get on a heater like he did at the end of last year? No, it doesn't mean that he could. Like, and we talked about that before too, Ian. Players just get hot. Look at Jacoby Brissett, for crying out loud. Would we have ever thought he was doing this? And it took like 3 weeks before I finally moved Jacoby's stuff up. Like but it was 3 huge performances in a row. So having said all that, Jalen Coker comes through with a 17.4 fantasy points. Look, we love Jalen Coker. You love Jalen Coker. You know, the Cokeheads love this. Ian's always got his Cokehead tweet, from Cameron from Ferris Bueller's Day Off, which is really in, Succession, which is also a great show. 2 great movies. But like, what am I going to do with the wide receiver 2 on the Panthers? Most likely nothing. I mean, unless I'm in a really
cherish him.
Cherish it. Well, look, here's the 6 games we've had of Jalen Coker and a starting.
No. I think we get the point. I don't need to hear
8.1 fantasy points per game. Right, that includes today, which was 17.4. So Coker's a stash play, but like, don't get over your skis and like start putting him in starting lineups and stuff.
I thought you read the rules for this podcast, Dwayne. No Jalen Coker slander will be tolerated. We'll make sure to edit that out before we send it on.
We were on Coker like way early. We've talked about him for a long time. It's just not a good situation.
By the way, I would move those projections down for Bryce Young next week, mostly though, just because he is on a bye alongside the rest of the team. So keep that in mind. Last thing to talk about here, Dwayne, is the ever shrinking Rico Dowdle stranglehold on this backfield. Yeah, he's still running hard, but you know what? So is Chuba Hubbard at this point. So Chuba had 83 yards rushing, also 41 yards, and that touchdown I mentioned before that again was more or less a rush attempt. But look, when Rico was absolutely crushing earlier in the year, guys, it was a big gulf in terms of what he was bringing to the table versus what Chuba was, who, let's face it, was playing through through a calf injury and then perhaps came back a little bit too early. As things stand right now, man, Chuba has actually been the more efficient running back ever since they actually turned it back over to Rico before that Packers game where he really went off. So it does seem like, Dwayne, that we're nearing something close to a 50-50 split at this point.
Yeah. Also, running back efficiency can just be super freaking fluky. Like over 3 or 4 game samples, Chuba Hubbard might just be the same damn player he was earlier in the year, but now he's getting the right block. Like, just weird stuff happens. They're both good players. Chuba Hubbard and Rico Dowdle are both good players. And to your point, now they're both playing good, and Hubbard is playing slightly better than Dowdle right now. And to your point, yeah, we've seen a massive swing. 58% of the snaps today went to Chuba Hubbard. 49% of the rushing attempts, 51% of the rushing attempts went to Dowdle. So he's still involved on the ground, but 63% of the route participation went to Chuba in this game. And then the 2-minute offense went to Rico Dowdle. So I don't know. Like, I mean, kind of mixing all these roles up, Ian. The bottom line is Hubbard came away with 16 carries and Dowdle came away with 14 carries in this game. So you know what happens? Chuba Hubbard upgrades to running back 3 territory. Yay! And Rico Dowdle downgrades to running back 3 territory. Yay! Ooh. I know it sucks. It sucks. And we have the bye next week, so we'll get to wait it out, and then we'll just see what happens from there, man. Like, still usable players for your fantasy team, but they're not winning you your league if they don't separate from one another.
So again, unfortunate, got some real nice weeks out of Rico, but yeah, I think those days of him being ranked as a top 12 running back are unfortunately in the rearview mirror. Meanwhile, for the Rams, just a little over 24 minutes time of possession. So yeah, they weren't really able to sustain drives in the usual capacity that we're seeing from Matthew Stafford and company. I think a big part of that was Carolina kind of doing their thing on offense, controlling the clock. But yeah, man, wasn't great. 2 interceptions from Matthew Stafford. One was tipped. The other one was a bad throw behind Puka, ended up being taken back all the way. Also lost a fumble on a sack. So it was only pressure on 13% of his dropbacks. Just really wasn't a good performance from Stafford on the day. More good than bad, though, obviously across the year. And there was still some good today, particularly throwing to Devontae Adams inside the 10-yard line. Had another 2 touchdowns to his ever-growing total. Now has freaking 11 in his last 6 games. Unfortunately, though, there has been a price to pay for that. Puka Nacua, 72 scoreless yards on this one, even though he had an incredible one-handed catch that probably was the catch of the day until Treylon Burks decided to do his best OBJ impression here a few minutes ago. And also Kyron Williams, as much as the 72 yards and a touchdown on the ground was great. Again, we've seen that top 5 ceiling taken away a bit this year, mostly because, again, Devontae just won't stop scoring goal line touchdowns. So any big takeaways here, Dwayne? Again, it would have been cooler if the Rams, I guess, put up 40 points, but man, 28, like in a bad performance, is still pretty freaking cool.
No takeaways. Everything's the same as it's been. You want Rams on your fantasy team. It's going to be better for you more often than it's not going to be. Puka's going to be fine. Got his route participation up to 87% today. So, like, look, you're going to have little down stretches. That's all that's happened. 33% target share still today. And 13.2 fantasy points. Like, fine. We'll take that as a floor game. I know it's in a tough week if you guys are playing over at Real Time Sports, FFPC, some of these places where it's the first week of the playoffs or the last week before you get in. Not ideal timing, for some of these performances, but like I change nothing here with the Rams.
And then you have Blake Corum, 81 yards and a touchdown on the ground. It seemed to actually happen shortly after Kyron Williams pulled himself out of the game, got a little bit banged up. We did see him listed with an ankle injury before halftime. That said, he didn't miss much, if any, actual time of the game. So do expect him to be back and ready to go ahead of the Rams Week 14 matchup against the Cardinals. But hey, guys, again, Brian Robinson and also Blake Corum, 2 of the better handcuffs you can go ahead and scoop up if given the opportunity on the waiver wire. That said, this has been our Xfinity Game of the Week, brought to you by Xfinity. Imagine all your football all in one place. Easy. Xfinity, imagine that. And also, just want to give a shout out to our friends over at Xfinity, because guys, if you call yourself a sports fan, well, you got to have Xfinity. All the games all in one place. You can check out the Sports Zone, which features every pro football game and over 1,000 college games. Presumably, you could have even watched the Ohio State University take the freaking hammer out on Michigan in the big house. You could have watched that with Xfinity. Highlights and alerts all in one place. Also, check out the multi-view option. Allows you to be up in the 4 stadiums at once, so you can watch Ohio State beat down Michigan and also watch 3 other games during that. You can also use the Xfinity Fan View. You can check the live score of Ohio State beating Michigan, also see odds and stats all in one place, personalized to you. And you could have actually experienced Ohio State beating Michigan in Xfinity Enhanced 4K viewing. Simply stunning experience. So again, voice remote, just say football to experience events like that and so much more. Imagine all your football all in one place. Easy. Xfinity, imagine that. Learn more at Xfinity.com. No restrictions do apply. New residential customers only. taxes and fees extra and subject to change. Hopefully no Michigan men over there at Xfinity, Dwayne. But anyway, Jaguars took down the Titans 25-3. Jaguars winning outright as 6-point faves, under cash at 42.5. So good performance from Trevor Lawrence. Not going to lie, guys. I have my quad box up there. I watched 4 games and I have the red zone to catch up on everything else. I did not deem Jaguars Titans worthy enough to be in the quad box. So what I did see, though, Trevor Lawrence seemed like he was having one of the better T-Law games. He actually was throwing downfield, as evidenced by his 10.5-yard average target depth. And just, I feel like when T-Law is at his best, he's got a little bit of time in the pocket and he just really does have an arm to stress defenses all over the field. And he's not afraid of throwing over the middle of the field. Kind of helps being, a 6'5" quarterback to do things like that. So good stuff there. The bulk of the yards did go. Jacoby Myers caught all 6 of his targets for 90 yards and a touchdown. Had a nice 50-yard catch and run in there. Also another nice performance from Brenton Strange, Dwayne, someone who caught 3 or 4 targets for 45 yards in the score. I was surprised at how many kind of good start sit questions I was getting with Strange. I mean, people really want to start this guy. Not saying you can't. We had him as like a borderline tight end 1. I don't think he's going to necessarily get up in the top 5, top 6, territory or anything. But hey, back-to-back real nice games since coming off IR.
Yeah, I mean, Myers and Strange. So, I mean, Strange, we'll start with him since you were just there. The last 2 games since he's been back from injury, averaging 13.9 fantasy points per game. He scored 13.5 today, 78% route participation rate over those 2 games, 81% today. He's got a 16% target share, averaging 4.5 targets, 2.76 yards per route run. Really small sample over those 2, but Strange is a guy that did flash a little bit last year whenever they had some other players out. He is a former 2nd-round pick out of Penn State. He's in his 3rd year. So, yeah, there's some things to like. I do think that Brenton Strange is a borderline tight end 1, and he's going to kind of be in that mix. And it'll come down to the matchups. It'll come down to the team totals, those sort of things as to whether or not, he's coming in for us at like tight end somewhere between 9 and 12, or if we've got him more like 13 to 15. You guys know how that little muddled area is. But I will say, of a lot of players that we talk about that are in that range every week, he is at least a younger player that could be ascending, right? And so that's something that's really positive for Brenton Strange. Jacoby Myers, man, 3 games now in a full-time role with the team, averaging 15.9 fantasy points per game, 90% route participation, 23% target share. That's 6 targets per game. He has a 2.49 yards per route run. So right now, Jacoby Myers and Brenton Strange looking like the top 2 options on the Jaguars. Parker Washington was injured today, so he left the game. We did not have Diami Brown active, so it was Austin Trammell coming in to play the slot wide receiver after we lost Parker Washington. And Brian Thomas Jr. returned in, but he gave us 4.8 PPR points on an 84% route participation. So maybe it's the first game back coming off the ankle injury. It was of the high ankle variety, but he's missed a few weeks. So we'll see if BTJ turns it around. But right now, like Myers, I know how these little small game stretches can go. And I think BTJ, obviously, we've seen carries the better ceiling, guys. We saw it at the end of last year. But BTJ has not been good this year. And so if you had to choose right now, the wide receiver 1 the rest of the way for the Jaguars, Ian hates that I'm about to ask him this. He's shaking his head. Would you say it's Jacoby Myers or Brian Thomas Jr.?
You know what? I don't want to act like this is someone just random going up against BTJ, because Jacoby's a freaking good wide receiver, and he has been. So BTJ's hurt. Give me Jacoby Myers.
Yeah, and that's the thing. You're right. We have a track record with Myers. I know, guys, he's never been a wide receiver 1, but you guys, the way some of you talk about him is like he's been a wide receiver 4 his whole career. He's been a borderline wide receiver 2 the last 2 years, and wide receiver 2 for big chunks of the year. So I agree. I think right now, like Myers is the guy that I'm more comfortable starting. If BTJ gets hot, we acknowledge that Brian Thomas Jr. is the guy that could still break fantasy leagues, but man, it's been a long time since we've seen that guy.
And I don't know how Jacoby already looks more comfortable in this offense after 3 games than BTJ has after an entire offseason and 2 months in the system. But that's the case, Dwayne. So as much as I would like to keep wish casting something to change, it just is not. More on that sort of mindset here when we get to the Vikings here in a little bit. Otherwise, yeah, man, backfield really seemed to be the same old, Was Bashaw Tootin scoring the short touchdown, but Travis Etienne remains the lead running back. Y'all correct, Dwayne?
Yes, Travis Etienne and his 5.1 PPR points. We finally move him up the ranks a little bit. Thank God for Freeman's game model. which, sorry, Friedman, you missed on the cover here, but you've been smashing, so we'll allow it. The model can be wrong every once in a while, but that's the thing that held me off of ETN and Kevin Moore's like a mid-range running back 2 instead of like a borderline running back 1 this week. But yes, he was still the lead ball carrier, 55% of the rushing attempts. Tootin had 36%. He was also the clear leader in route participation at 44% versus 13% for Mr. Bayshul Tootin. Speaking of wish casting.
I'm telling you guys, Jeffrey Simmons, T'Vondre Sweat, it's tough to run against these Titans. I know if your name's Jonathan Taylor, you'll be just fine, but it's one of these weird things where, again, Titans run D and then the Bengals against wide receivers. We almost just assume that, these are smash spots. Really hasn't been that way this year, so just keep that in mind. Next week when the Browns take on the Titans, we'll have the Jaguars hosting the Colts. Again, AFC South here getting real interesting down the stretch. Speaking of those Titans, just 188 total yards of offense. Look, we've kind of talked about it, man. It's a very, very sad state of affairs in Tennessee. I maintain to have plenty of hope with Cam Ward in the future. Obviously, today they'll take in 3 more sacks. Wasn't one of those days. I was just hoping, Dwayne, that we could see Chimere DK start getting going here. Obviously, Alec Manor did return to the lineup, but just he's been the one sort of, bright light here, particularly for people, in return yardage leagues, but even just regular, he had the 2 touchdowns last week. Unfortunately, today, just 8 freaking yards and also lost a fumble. So actually wound up with negative fantasy points. So yeah, can't trust anyone here, Dwayne. It's unfortunate.
Yeah, it is. The only thing we can say is you did have Justin Jefferson and Alec Iomanor available in the game. And DK
Justin Jefferson?
Not Justin. God, that's how bad it's gotten. Van Jefferson outscored Justin Jefferson today. Just to be clear, he had 3.5 PPR points, which is more than Justin Jefferson. I know these are terrible times, but what I will say with DK is that even though you had all 3 guys, he at least still had the 83% route participation. So I'm not going to change a lot with him. Like we've had him in the wide receiver 5 territory. We've talked about weeks with buys. He's more of a wide receiver 4. I think he's still in the same range, even though you had a real dud here. The other guy I will mention is Gunnar Helm. Like he's been flashing a little bit, not enough that you guys can start him. But if you're playing in a 32 teamer with Ian Hartitz, Gunnar Helm's probably already rostered actually in that sort of league. But if you're playing like a 14 teamer, and you're looking for something down the stretch that maybe they just decide they want to flip flop and let their young guy play, Gunnar Helm's looked pretty good, man. 8.3 fantasy points today. And he did lead the team at tight end and routes. A slight edge, Ian, 52% to Helm versus 50% for our great Chig Okonkwo.
That's just the problem, man. Like, okay, it's not like we were expecting just extreme fireworks in Tennessee, but I was hoping at least at the beginning of the year, like Ridley would be healthy enough and available enough to just dominate the few passing yards that were around. We thought Chig could take over the tight end room, and then like Pollard would probably be the running back with Spears injured. And right now it's just really
37% target share between the 2 tight ends today, Ian. If we could have that, we would we would take it. 13 targets between Helm and Chig.
And again, Titans and Cleveland next week. So please, for the love of God, do your best not to start anyone involved in this unfortunate dumpster fire of an offense. Moving along, we had the Buccaneers take down the Cardinals 20-17. Tampa Bay did not cover us 3.5-point favorites. The under did cash, though, at 44.5 in this one. So good to see Baker Mayfield back in action. Didn't seem at all limited from that left shoulder AC joint injury. In fact, took off rushing 6 times for 27 yards, doing his usual Baker headbutts for the game. Gotta love that guy. The real story, though, Dwayne, was the return of one Bucky Irving. Also didn't look any worse for the wear, on his way racking up 81 total yards and a touchdown on the ground. Almost had a second touchdown, got nullified on a hold, which yes, kind of helped the touchdown happen in the first place, but also got stopped at the 1-yard line and didn't score a touchdown on the same drive. Normally this would upset me, Dwayne, because I want, our most fantasy relevant players to score touchdowns, but we did get a Tristan Wirfs touchdown out of that whole ordeal. So for this point, I'll say, okay, Bucky, I'm happy you didn't score. But man, coming into this game, like we were hearing reports that he would be limited, and just seeing 19 touches, Dwayne, like that's a pretty great start.
Todd Bowles strikes again. We might put him on a snap count like Chris Godwin in his first game back. Just kidding, guys. 81% of the rushing attempts, 17 carries. He did have the 2 targets as well. 16.1 fantasy points, and a great quote from Tristan Wirfs after the game. He said that all week they had run that play and they were just little soft like layup passes from Baker, and Baker threw a bullet, and he said, but Buddha Baker is who he's talking about, was about to light him up. So he was thankful for the laser beam throw, even though he got a little nervous when he saw it coming. Good catch, Tristan Wirfs.
Notice Rashad White still got the start, though. Like, I'd almost be insulted to be just like ceremonial starter. Like, just come on. What are we doing?
Yeah, well, I will say Rashad White was the clear-cut running back 2 today. Basically, Sean Tucker disappeared. So all the talk about him, like, really having he had 14% of the snaps, enough to kind of be annoying, but really droppable, I would say, in small and medium-sized leagues. You got to be in a sicko league to be hanging on a Tucker. If we did see Irving out again, I think we've seen enough to know that Tucker's probably the lead ball carrier, but it's still like it's a very tight split. It's not like he's the running back 1. It's a 1A, 1B situation because they trust Rashad White, on passing down stuff. He had a 39% route participation today, and he led the backfield in targets with 3.
White, to his credit, they have a 15-yard touchdown catch nullified. Again, that was on the same drive, though, as the worst touchdown. So I'm happy the Zebras threw that flag when they did. Otherwise, in the wide receiver world, Dwain, another 42 scoreless yards from Emeka Egbuka, looking more and more like someone we should probably be treating as a wide receiver 3, particularly with Chris Godwin coming back and looking like pretty close to Chris Godwin. The touchdown drop sucked. Okay, it hit him in the chest and everything, but he actually was going out there and breaking some tackles and getting some yak. Looked far healthier, I would just say, off an eye test than he did earlier in the year when he tried to make his initial return. So thoughts on this wide receiver room moving forward, because we probably still won't have Mike Evans for another couple weeks.
Yeah, I am not moving Emeka Egbuka into wide receiver 3 territory. Like, I get it, guys, but here's what you have to be telling yourself. You have to be saying that you think that this low catch rate is just going to continue. And we have a quarterback we like, and Baker Mayfield, who's playing hurt and played pretty well today. So he's going to be another week removed from that. I still think Baker's going to be good down the stretch. I mean, Egbuka had 8 targets today, led the team at 31%. He had 84 air yards, led them in that category as well. I do think the concern is Mike Evans could return as soon as week 15. Jalen McMillan, 21-day window open. I don't think Jalen McMillan's going to really do anything to Egbuka's playing time, to be honest. Like, Egbuka's been so good. Jalen McMillan, I think, will probably take over, probably challenge Tez Johnson, maybe for some of that role, but Tez has also been good. So I think it remains to be seen, like, what McMillan's role will be. Evans is the one that when he returns, Ian, we can't have Baker throwing for 200 yards. Like, Baker's got to be back to throwing for like 260, 270 at that point to really support like the multiple mouths. But Baker's good enough. That could very well happen. So I'm not going wide receiver 3 territory on Egbuka. I don't blame people if that's where they want to go. But if you're really like listening to a lot of stuff we research and study, like, the underlying data is all still there for Egbuka. Like, it's been a brutal stretch, no doubt about it. I get it. He's not in the wide receiver 1 conversation anymore, but I can't go wide receiver 3. I still think he's a wide receiver 2.
I could be a dick and say wide receiver 4. That's what he's been since week 6. I'm not saying.
I mean, you can, but you also look at the same stuff I do, and like, you're not going to put him there. Yeah,
I will not. Tez Johnson, full-time role gone.
Yeah. 55% route participation today. It's getting late, guys. Not as late as usual. But Chris Godwin, man, like that's the thing. Godwin's coming on. He only had a 67% route participation rate, but looked a lot better today. Like, catching balls down the field, not just real low ADOT stuff. Like, he ended up with an 8.8 ADOT on the day. But he had a couple of nice catches downfield. Honestly, I thought it was going to be a pretty big game for Godwin. Like, if you saw the way the first half was going, finished the day with 10.8 PPR points, but it was good to see from him. So I think Godwin's still in wide receiver 4 territory, but definitely like trending in the right direction. The challenge will be when Evans returns, like, that's going to be tough on Godwin if Egbuka is still getting the targets he's getting.
Buccaneers home against the Saints next week. Not exactly a god-awful defense, but certainly one that if Baker and Egbuka are working at the top of their powers, we do see this whole offense take a nice step forward. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I think you can drop Kate Otten. Do you agree? Like, with Godwin healthy now, and because we've seen this multiple times. When the receivers are healthy, Otten's a forgotten man. When they're all hurt, like, they'll go to him. They'll throw this stuff underneath the coverage. But I think Kate Otten's droppable. Like, I think he's a low-end tight end 1, a low-end tight end 2 the rest of the way.
100% with you there. Meanwhile, over at the Cardinals, death, taxes, and Jacoby Brissett thrown for over 300 yards in the year 2025. Also tacked on 2 touchdowns. Did have a bad interception on the first drive, trying to force things into traffic. But yeah, just again, a situation where I think we can agree that although Trey McBride, Marvin Harrison Jr., and like Michael Wilson, they've all done some good things. And McBride obviously is just an elite talent. But just the fact that Jacoby continues to do this, man, on pretty relatively good efficiency, man, just continues to be one of the bigger surprises of the season for me. me. Of course, we did have, again, the return of Marv, and he did, Dwain, seem to go back to working as the number one target here. Had 7 targets to 6 from Michael Wilson, had a nice 69 yards and caught 6 of those. That said, Marv did suffer a heel injury there at the end that seemingly had him running on and off the field. So we'll see what happens again with that injury. But yeah, Dwain, I think it was a 1 week stretch there where we have Michael Wilson ranked ahead of Marv. I don't know about you, but with the benefit of good health, I will be going back to Marv. That said, I think both guys are going to still be in that kind of wide receiver 3 mix, but Marv, I'll be ahead.
Well, I mean, essentially what happens today, like the 15 targets we've been seeing for Michael Wilson were split between the two guys, right? We had 14 between them. Now, I will say this, before Marvin Harrison got the heel injury, guys, which was in the third quarter, he didn't play very much at all in the fourth quarter. It was very limited. So over the first 3 quarters of the game, Marvin Harrison Jr. had a 90% route participation with a 29% target share versus a 13% target share for Michael Wilson. Now, Michael Wilson was still out there. It wasn't like he wasn't playing. 97% route participation for Wilson, 90% over that first 3 quarters for Marvin Harrison. So those are your 2 primary guys. So I'm with you. Like seeing that first 3, quarters, it was really back to Marv instead of Wilson. So Wilson, as good as he was over these last 2 games, like it's just going to be tough now with Harrison back. And I do think, Ian, let's see what you think. Like, I think we could see this flip flop. I think we could see this flip-flop from game to game. I think the point is it's going to be tough for either one of them to just massively boom in fantasy, even with Jacoby playing as well as he is, because we also have Trey McBride, who we know is getting his stuff basically every single week. The main guy that got really squeezed today, completely out of it, was Greg Dortch. 32% route participation for him, with both of the other starting wide receivers playing most of the game.
Hate to see that for our one true short king. And come on, guys, give me that, the wild Dortch out there. I want to see at least 1 rush attempt, per game for my guy. Didn't get it today. But I will say, man, Marv coming out, I thought this was one of his better games. You can't play the Cowboys every single week, obviously, but just in terms of strong hands and just going out there and looking like a legit first-round pick, was good to see Marv, maybe with a little bit of a fire under his butt from watching Michael Wilson ball the heck out here over the past 2 weeks. Mentioned McBride again, 82 yards and yet another touchdown, continuing to look like one of the best football players, regardless of position in the NFL. Meanwhile, Dwain Bam Knight did find the end zone on a touchdown catch, kind of got lost in the coverage, running hard, as was Michael Carter, man. He had a sick first down catch where he legit made 3 dudes miss on his way to getting the first down. I think Trey Benson could be back, but I don't know, man. And if he's not going to be, obviously Amari DiMercado could mix in as well. But this is a pretty even 50-50 backfield at this point where, if you are in a bind with the buys, I mean, I think we're probably going to have both guys in our top 36 next week.
Yeah, Bam Knight quietly playing well. He was, somebody we talked about as a borderline running back 2 this past week. So if we don't have Benson in a week with 4 teams on bye, he's going to be in the top 24. Knight will be. And it's what you said. Knight's getting the more of the work on the ground. He had 69% of the rushing attempts today at 11 total. He also had 3 targets, so that was nice. You talked about the touchdown that he scored there, but it is Carter more on passing downs, and he had a 16% target share today. With 6 targets. Like Brissett, man, like lifting everyone. Bam Knight scored 16.8 points. Carter scored 11.4. McBride scored 22. Harrison scored 12.9 in 3 quarters. I mean, obviously Wilson got left out in the cold here with his 6.6 PPR points, but goodness gracious. We usually have 3 guys like worthy of starting in fantasy across the backs and tight ends and at least one of the wide receivers every week with Jacoby Brissett under center. So we'll see what happens with Trey Benson. Felt like he was close last week, but might have had a little bit of a setback. So we'll have to wait and see what we hear with that. DeMarcado has a high ankle sprain, so he's still week to week.
Whole thing's just been weird with Benson. Even when he was on IR, we just couldn't get an update. So again, wouldn't necessarily expect him back. I do hope so, though. Cardinals going to get a little bit tougher next week against the Rams, then a lot tougher in week 15 against the Texans. But I don't know, man. We just saw Bryce Young company have their way with that Rams defense as well. So back to the well with Jacoby and company for at least 1 week longer. On to the late afternoon slate. A little bit less exciting than the early games, but still football nevertheless. Seahawks beat down the Vikings 26-0. Seattle covering with these as 10.5-point faves. The over did not cash at 41.5. This game was 13-0 at halftime, and it really never even felt that close, Dwain. Just a preposterously bad performance from Max Brosmer. So more on that in just a bit. But honestly, not exactly the, man, you guys must really miss me performance from Sam Darnold as well. Seemed like he was flustered from the pressure early on. Took 4 sacks and just a 2.7 yard average target depth, Dwain. So again, got the 26-0 win, but that was, of course, aided by a defensive touchdown and just a Seahawks run game. Really was, I would say, one of Darnold's worst looking performances of the season. And it shouldn't be a surprise then that we did finally see Jackson Smith and Jigba come back to earth, courtesy of 23 scoreless yards. So whatever, JSN still rank him as wide receiver 1, but it does suck for that chase for 2,000 yards, man. That's really going to be tough for him.
Yeah. Yeah. This was a parade. This was the low ADOT parade. Average depth of target, guys. JSN 1.8, Cooper Kupp 3.3, Rashid Shaheed 3.7, AJ Barner 1.8. Like, what is going on? Like,
I think Darnold was spooked.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, and he was playing the team that would know him very well.
Yeah.
Kevin O'Connell knows what he likes to do. The Vikings have shown to show up at times, not every single week, but, they've got some players on defense. So, yeah, I think this is a game that you just, wad it up. You throw, if you wrote anything down about it, just chunk it in the trash, man. Just chunk it in the trash. JSN is really the only player you're starting on this team every single week. And then we have the running back tandem here, Ian, which continues to frustrate fantasy managers. But I will say this, Walker still kept the lead, 53% of the snaps, but 44% of the rushing attempts went to Charbonnet, which was slightly more than Walker at 41%. So 14 carries. Walker was still slightly ahead, 14-13. But then you had the 4 targets also to Walker. So he ended up with 18 opportunities, but 13 to Charbonnet. And as your wonderful tweet said, yes, Charbonnet stole the touchdown despite Walker doing a lot of the work to get him down there.
I mean, if you just look on the surface at these last 6 games, Walker's had 16 touches, 14, 19, 15, 13, 17 on a really good team. He just got 1 touchdown his last 9. And even that one was lucky. Weird. It happened with the 2-minute timeout situation going on. So it just sucks. I will say, Dwayne, like, we rarely see this extreme of kind of just splits in terms of like, man, they will not give Walker the ball near the goal line.
Yeah, no, it's it's a pain, man. And I don't know what to say about it at this point. Like we just have to go with what we have. Like, I think Walker's a borderline running back 2. Charbonnet's a low end running back 3. I would still start Walker over Charbonnet every single week the rest of the way, unless something changes here. But that doesn't mean he's going to outscore Charbonnet every single one of those weeks. 10.4 PPR points today for Walker on those 18 opportunities. And like you said, on a good offense. Like, can we not get a little stretch? It's nothing like we don't get anything like what we saw with the Bears today. We haven't had a game like that, right? We haven't had a game like, what we, seen with the Panthers. So it's a little bit of a struggle. And honestly, historically, it's always a challenge when you have 2 backs splitting the backfield this much. But I still think Walker's the guy to have the rest of the way. But obviously it's a tricky situation.
And look, we're hyping up Walker out of our own personal fantasy bias, which I'm sure many of you guys have as well. Charbonnet, even if he wasn't playing that great at the beginning of the year, he has actually picked it up. And I'll say this, guys, looking at just missed tackles, forced poor rush attempt, which is just one stat, but one that I do think generally passes the eye test. Charbonnet is now actually ahead of Walker on the ground, guys. It's Bijan Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs, and then Zach Charbonnet as your 3 most elusive running backs in this metric. So again, I know we can look at some of the yards per carry and things like that, but Charbonnet really has been playing some good ball. So I'm not trying to put him down. Just, Walker, I would like to see the workhorse role, but it doesn't seem to be coming to fruition. Clearly things working out just fine in Seattle, but I do tend to agree with Dwayne. 219 total yards from Seattle would not expect that to continue next week when they take on the Falcons. Meanwhile, with the Vikings, Dwayne, I'm not so sure we can say that their offensive ineptitude won't continue. Just 162 total yards. And as we kind of said at the beginning, things can apparently get worse from the 9 experience there. Max Brosmer, 4 interceptions, also had 4 sacks. Just, again, horrible. I would say the majority of the interceptions, if not all of them, were 100% his fault. And just, I don't know, man, Justin Jefferson didn't even have a target for the large majority of this first half. Jordan Addison was getting force-fed the ball for some reason. To not be able to just chuck the rock downfield to Justin Jefferson 3 or 4 times per game, I don't get it. But 2 catches for 4 yards. We keep having this horrific, early week experience where it's how low is too low to rank Justin Jefferson. We haven't found it yet, Dwayne. We're going to have 4 teams on bye next week. The Vikings are facing the Commanders. That should be a smash matchup. I have no faith in it being one. I guess we're now hoping JJ McCarthy is healthy enough to return. Good God, man.
I don't even know what to say. There's nothing to say here. Justin Jefferson's going to have to move lower in the ranks. He scored 2.4 fantasy points today. Jordan Addison, 8.6. Hawkinson, 11.9. That was one of his better games of the season. But yeah, honestly, the one good thing that happened here for JJ McCarthy is that Brosmer was actually worse than he was. So I guess if you're looking for some sort of mental boost for your young quarterback, maybe this is it. Hey, Kevin O'Connell, quarterback whisperer, except for these two guys.
I guess, man. Okay, we saw several quarterbacks in this system. I know they were more of the veteran variety, which I will say that is something I think we need to maybe keep in mind a little bit more in the future. Like a bad 30, 31-year-old quarterback, I'll take that over an inexperienced 23-year-old one.
Yeah, I mean, look, I agree. And here's the deal. Like, at least with Nick Mullins, like we had seen him actually have like 300-yard performances with the 49ers and a kind of a similar scheme. And so, I mean, yeah, I'm with you. But you would think like JJ McCarthy, like we just had higher hopes for him. Obviously, our buddy Thor got us real excited.
First round pick. Again, mistakes are made. It is what it is. But yeah, since JJ McCarthy got back under center in week 9, Jefferson, the wide receiver, 42, averaging fewer PPR points per game than massive names like John Mechie and Super DeMario Douglas. Sheesh. Running back room, unfortunately, seemed to lose Aaron Jones. He got smacked by DeMarcus Lawrence. Unfortunately, seemed to hurt his shoulder. That lost a fumble along the way. Jordan Mason came in. I will say, Dwayne, I know Mason didn't exactly light the league on fire when he was working in place of Aaron Jones, but I still think he was the RB16 in PPR points per game during that stretch. Offensive environment hasn't done him a ton of favors. He was running hard out there. When I do some of these charts where it gets kind of yards after contact and missed tackles forced, like he is up there in that top upper right-hand quadrant, of kind of the more efficient running backs in the league. I think one of the problems is, again, the scoring environment and also just this banged up offensive line that we probably don't bring out enough. So again, if Aaron Jones is going to be out, I don't think we're going to be ranking Mason as, a top 10 running back or anything like that. But I guess Washington, man, 15 to 20 touches. Like I think Mason should be in more lineups than not.
Yeah, I think Mason will be startable next week, but we're not going to be excited about it because this offense is just so terrible. Like really where Mason can separate as a fantasy player is scoring the touchdowns, right? He's a good player inside the 5-yard line. Showed that last year and actually in the years before that with the 49ers when he got his opportunities. Just hasn't come to fruition here. And to your point, yeah, the offensive line, man, like that's a massive story here with the Vikings. What Friedman, the wet blanket, likes to call cluster injuries when you got multiple starters out, and it just has this compounding effect on the rest of the team. And we've definitely seen that this year with the Vikings. I will just say real quickly, before the injury, Aaron Jones was in his normal role, 56, and it was in the third quarter when he hurt his shoulder. 56% of the snaps, 67% of the rushing attempts, and 50% route participation. We'll just have to monitor the injury and see what they say about that heading into week 14.
One more injury for that cluster. Center Ryan Kelly dealing with a hip flexor issue now, so keep an eye on that. Again, ahead of next week's matchup with the Commanders. Moving right along, we had the Bills take down the Steelers 26-7. Buffalo winning outright as 3-point faves. The under cashed at 45.5. This game was 7-3 in favor of the Steelers at halftime, and then Aaron Rodgers quickly lost a fumble for a scoop and score. Buffalo scored a couple more touchdowns, and that was that. So not exactly a good game from Josh Allen, just 123 yards through the air. Another just hellaciously low average target depth, Dwayne, for Josh Allen of all people, 2.1. How is this dude going to sleep tonight? Come on, man. So that was actually the second lowest mark of 2025. Only that just god-awful Jordan Love performance against the Browns from way back when actually had a lower average depth of target. So did see Allen find the end zone as a rusher, 76 rushing touchdown of his career. That is now the all-time quarterback career record. Did get, kind of pushed by his lineman the last 5 yards, but whatever, that's legal in the year 2025. Help save the fancy day there. But otherwise, man, James Cook, 144 rushing, 33 receiving yards. Couldn't find the end zone, did get stopped in the 1-yard line and did lose a fumble. But hey, pretty good performance to have, Yeah, 177 yards would have been cooler if he scored, but obviously can't complain much there. I would say the big story, if any, was Keon Coleman returning to action. Did we see a full-time role, Dwayne? He did manage to catch a short touchdown.
No. 48% of the routes, 70% to Gabe Davis, 52% to Khalil Shakir, Brandon Cook with a 37% route participation, Tyrell Shavers 37%. Man, this room is an absolute freaking disaster. It is a disaster. We don't want anything to do with it. Shakir is the only usable option, and every time you try to trust him, Ian, you get Shakir, he scored 1.5 fantasy points today. I'm like, it's just a gross rotation. The highlight of the game, like James Cook had 32 carries.
Yeah, it's a lot. That is a lot. I think Dwayne Meyer lost his Mike. We'll get him back. But yeah, 8 catches for 110 yards against Houston a week ago for Khalil Shakur. Dwayne, I just don't understand how this dude has this big of duds, have -3 yards a week before that. He was being more consistent. This is relatively newfound, but again, I just kind of think this entire Bills passing game at this point. So hopefully we do get Dalton Kincaid back, because next up, again, we do have the Bills facing the Bengals. And man, as we all know, getting tight ends to face that Cincy defense is pretty much the closest thing we have to fantasy football nirvana. Meanwhile, for the Steelers, just 166 total yards, only 18 minutes time possession, man. Again, this offense couldn't get much of anything going on. It did seem like Aaron Rodgers might have re-injured the wrist. He also just had blood gushing out of his nose after Joey Bosa sacked him, but clearly working out less than 100%. They were using a lot of pistol out there to try to, just remove the instances where he was going to be under center, and it just seemed to really limit the entire offense. So we were getting a lot of touchdowns earlier in the year from DK Metcalf, Dwayne, but it's another situation, man, where just as much as I've at least tried to hold out some hope and keep him around that wide receiver 3 borderline, like he's been more of a wide receiver 4, honestly, over the course of this past month or so.
Yeah, 4.8 average depth of target for freaking DK Metcalf today. Like, come on, guys. Like, what are we doing? Yeah, we want to get him some stuff short in the short area of the field, let him run after the catch. But come on, like it's like you said with Justin Jefferson. Can we just take like 2 shots a game at least, like down the field with Metcalf? Look, Arthur Smith just loves this tight end rotation stuff. Targets the tight ends, like none of them are worth anything in fantasy, but you add them all up, like they're taking away a lot of the targets. Yeah. And then you have the running backs who get quite a few targets. You had 4 today for Jaylen Warren. You had 3 for Kenneth Gainwell. So just a lot of check down stuff really over the last 5 to 6 weeks for this offense. And honestly, it was an offense that was outperforming itself. Like red zone, the percentage of times this offense reaches the red zone is not very good, but their touchdowns per drive were decent early in the year. And typically those things go hand in hand because you're going to score more of your touchdowns. That's where EPA comes from, guys. The closer you get right to the other opponent's goal line, the more likely you are to score a touchdown. So when you look at it, this is just it's an offense that's underperforming, man. Like it has like moments where things start to look nice, as moments where maybe we have something usable in fantasy, but you also have Arthur Smith pulling the strings and just doing really weird stuff with the player utilization.
It did seem like Jaylen Warren was more definitively the RB1 here, Dwayne, after a couple of weeks where it seemed way more like a 1A, 1B situation with Gainwell.
Yeah, not back to what we saw for that 4-week stretch where he was getting 80% of the attempts. It was 56% of the attempts today. So 10 rushing attempts. He did manage to punch one of those in for a touchdown. He handled 2 of 2 snaps inside the 5-yard line. But will that stick next week? We don't know, because they've been very willing to use Gainwell inside the 5. So I still think it's unpredictable. But yes, Warren is the lead back. He's going to get more of the rushing attempts, but Gainwell is still getting out there on passing downs. He's the guy getting more of the 2-minute offense. Warren, a capable pass catcher, and we did see it today, an 18% target share. That's probably his best mark. I don't have it in front of me in probably 5-6 games, somewhere in that range, because I know he was like at an 8 or 9% target share over the last 5 games whenever I was doing projections last week. So yeah, I mean, Warren back in the lead role, but Gainwell still, making enough noise that it's just kind of tough in an offense we're not crazy about.
Last thing, kudos to Warren for finally completing a hurdle. He got stuffed on his last 2 attempts over these last couple of weeks. Finally got there. 3rd try is a charm. Appreciate that level of devotion to that, rather reckless and dangerous cause. Steelers get the Ravens and Dolphins over these next 2 weeks. So hopefully, again, Warren can hold on to that role. Certainly has the matchups to make the most out of it. We had the Chargers take down the Raiders 31-14. Los Angeles winning as a 10-point fave. The over did cash here as well, 40.5. This one was 21-7 by the end of the 3rd. And again, kind of like the game we were talking about with the Seahawks, like it never even really felt all that close, mostly because the Raiders struggle to move the ball pretty much any time. They're not throwing it to Brock Bowers, which unfortunately isn't often enough. With Justin Herbert and the Chargers, though, this is going to be an injury we're going to be keeping an eye on for the duration of the week. They do face the Eagles on Monday Night Football in Week 14, but yeah, Justin Herbert will be undergoing surgery on his left hand on Monday. He did already say, though, I'm treating it as if I am playing Monday. So left hand, maybe we see them have to do some stuff with, wonky pitches or handoffs, but Justin Herbert, one of the toughest guys in the entire league, in Jim Harbaugh's opinion. So I would not necessarily count him out. If we do see Herbert sideline, guys, and you are in a super flex sort of format, don't have many great options, Trey Lance does have that dual threat archetype where you can go ahead and just maybe pray the football gods to see him run in for a touchdown, not completely nuke your score. So keep an eye out on that. But otherwise, Dwayne, because again, with these pass catchers, we saw it, Ladd scored, Quentin Johnson scored, but if it's going to be Trey Lance under center, it's going to be massive downgrades all the way
Yes.
around. I think the big part here is just this running back room and another great game from Kamani Vidal, his third 100+ yard effort on the year, and just even was more impressive than the raw counting stats. I mean, 124 of his 126 yards came after contact, and he was credited with 11 missed tackles forced. So great game from Mr. Kamani Vidal, someone who I know a ton of people were super high on coming out last year because he was a rookie. He didn't do everything that we were hoping for, but now as a forgotten year two vet, Dwayne, guys making plays.
Yeah, 20.7 PPR points today, 76% of the snaps, 71% route participation. He got 60% of the snaps inside the 5 today. Took all of the 2-minute offense. He had 1 target, so a 5% target share today. So yeah, Kamani Vidal, if we get another game without Omari and Hampton, and we talked about this last week, whenever we were kind of splitting the projection between Hampton and Vidal, that if you have Hampton out, Vidal is actually a bigger beneficiary because we just really know where all the carries are going to go. Once we finally get Hampton active, Ian, we don't know for sure what the split is going to look like. They're probably going to eventually give more of the work to Omari and Hampton. He's their first round pick. He looked really good early in the year, but I do think that Vidal has played well enough to keep that from being, one of these monster workloads where you get a guy at 70, 80% of the snaps. I think we could see Hampton more at like 60, 65% with Vidal, definitely still having a role.
Otherwise, guys, yeah. Again, going to be facing the Eagles next week. Wouldn't exactly be expecting fireworks with Trey Lance, but still a situation where Ladd McConkey, Quentin Johnson, and company still pretty good out there. Dwayne, where would you think about ranking Ladd if we do actually see Trey Lance under center? Because again, he's been on that kind of wide receiver one borderline. This would be a pretty steep downgrade, man.
Yeah, wide receiver, low end wide receiver 2. We're going to have 4 teams on bye, so I don't think getting him all the way to wide receiver 3 territory, although the risk will be real for a wide receiver 4 or wide receiver 5 performance. Like if you guys think about Trey Lance, like the closest comp I can think of that people will just know, Ian, it's going to be Justin Fields, right? He's going to run around. He's going to do all that. You're hoping he has a game where he throws for 200 yards, but he could throw for 85. Like it really is possible. Like 150 is probably around where he would project. And that's really low, guys. Like Bryce Young projects for like 175 to 185 every week for me. You think about like Max Brosmer this week was at like 160. So like in that range, it's not ideal. So while Lance could be usable in a super flex, to your point, it will downgrade all of these pass catchers.
Much like Fields, really has all the physical tools. That's why he was picked inside the top 5 way back when. But yeah, if only we could turn Trey Lance and Justin Fields, like with our podcast, if we could just turn their mental processing up like to 1.5 speed or so, we really could be cooking there. Unfortunately, that is not yet a possibility here on planet Earth. Meanwhile, for the Raiders, 156 total yards, 2 for 8 on third downs, just 24 minutes time of possession. New offensive coordinator Greg Olson apparently had 2 main goals, and that was to get Ashton Genty and Brock Bowers more involved in the offense. Certainly seeing the work with Ashton Genty, 96% snap rate, guys. That is absolutely bonkers. Unfortunately, the same cannot be said for Brock Bowers. Only 4 targets across 60 minutes of football. I don't know why he didn't have more. He caught all 4 of them for 63 yards and a pair of scores. The second one of the sick one-handed variety. And that actually came 2 plays after they fed him another target for another touchdown, but it didn't count because there's a timeout called before. So luckily, though, Dwayne, I do believe we had a victory in the McFarland household because of Brock Bowers. How about that?
Yeah, Zoe did swing by the office before she went to bed, and she said Brock Bowers finally, for once in his life, helped my fantasy team. So sorry, Brock. Those are her words, not mine, but nice job by you today. 22.3 fantasy points, 93% route participation rate. So they definitely had him out there on the field, even though the targets didn't come. But like he's Brock Bowers, like he's, top 3 guy. But I found the Greg Olson discourse really funny this week. Just with all, it's like you can tell we've reached the point in the year where we're just like, oh my God, we have to have something to write about. Like, guys, do you know how much it takes to change an offense? Like teams wait until their bye week to decide they want to play a rookie, like a guy that's been on their team the whole season. Like you can't just totally like revamp a whole offense. But here's the good news. Brock Bowers is a good player, and guess what? Quarterbacks typically throw the ball to the best players on the team. Brock Bowers is by far their best pass catcher. I know it was only 18% of the targets today, and Ian's mostly just, like shooting some strays, over the Greg Olson, talk this week, which I totally get. But Bowers, yeah, like he's the best option they have. They're going to throw the ball to him, whether Greg Olson is there or whether he wins the lottery and quits next Monday.
Where do you feel on just trying to be like, okay, because Ashton Genty, he's been a disappointment relative to where he was drafted. Hasn't completely lost your league, more than likely than not. But again, hasn't exactly paid off that round 2 price tag that we had to get him at in fantasy drafts. I know on the one hand, it's easy to say, well, like we knew the Raiders were going to be terrible. We should have kind of seen this coming. But one of the things I thought you did well in the offseason, Dwayne, was pointing out some of these narratives we come up with in fantasy and how, yeah, they are correct sometimes, but they seldom are of the one size fits all variety. So I mean, the Giants obviously have been terrible this year. That wasn't stopping Cam Scatterby from balling the hell out when he was healthy enough to do so. We got Breece Hall generally doing good things on the Jets offense. We even have, I don't know, nothing good going on in Tennessee. So I guess that's a bad example. Quinshon Judkins for 4 to 5 weeks was making the most out of stuff in Cleveland. So again, it's this. Yeah. So again, it's a situation where we should have downgraded Genty, but I feel like he already kind of was being downgraded a little bit. Now, we didn't know the Raiders offense was necessarily going to be this bad, but man, just any kind of big picture thoughts on this?
No, it's just what you said. Like those narratives, like they can really go either way on you. And you don't know for sure. Like if you're betting on the role and the talent as best possible, like that you can, and talent like is the main thing we're drafting is really talent, because we're looking for the upside. Like Genty's getting all the opportunity. It's just, it's not necessarily worked out. I'll just say this, like he's a player we're going to continue to rank right around running back 1 territory, Ian, high end running back 2, low end running back 1. Because when you get a 96% snap share, like you're going to have the opportunities. Like, and Genty is still a player, guys, that could get hot, like, and just go on a great run to end the year because of all the volume he's getting. Man, the targets, 36% target share today. He had 8 targets. This dude, like over the last 5 weeks, like his target share is going to be probably, I'm not looking at it, 22, 23% now. Like it's going to be right there in the CMC range. So I get it. Not exactly blowing up, but to your point, Ian, yes, the narratives, they can really go either way on you. But it is funny how we want to, it really, I think a lot of it comes back to like, did you have the player on the bad team where it went bad? Or did you have the player that was on the bad team where it went good? Like Garrett Wilson to start this year, even with Justin Fields, was destroying it before his injuries. Right. So if you faded Garrett Wilson, like I did, because I thought the Jets offense was bad and I thought he was more of a wide receiver 3, you were wrong. Because he did well. Whereas if you faded Justin Jefferson because you thought JJ McCarthy was going to suck, you were right. Like it really can go either way.
So I will say the talent part with Genty shouldn't be an issue at this point. We've still seen him have these big games. And just on the season, guys, even today, you could see him breaking tackles left and right. Actually has the 5th best missed tackles rate on the season in terms of his ability to do it on rush attempts. So still think there'll be brighter days in the future. But yeah, for the love of God, Raiders, please figure out a realistically good OC and maybe a good offensive line while you're at it. So going to be the Raiders against the Broncos next week, Dwayne. This is the problem. So again, wouldn't necessarily completely say that Genty doesn't have a chance of booming down the stretch, but it is going to be tough. Broncos, Eagles, Texans over these next 3 weeks. We do get the Giants though in week 17 if you are lucky enough to make it to your fantasy squad with Genty as your RB1. With that in mind, guys, let's get to our DraftKings closing lines. I team up with DraftKings Sportsbook to bring you the ultimate way to tip off this NBA season. Right now, new customers who bet just $5 will get $200 in bonus bets if your bet wins, plus 3 months of NBA League Pass on us. That's right, new customers bet $5 will get $200 in bonus bets if your bet wins, plus 3 months of NBA League Pass on DraftKings. Just download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and sign up using the promo code FANTASYLIFE. The crown is yours. Hey, you can stay in on the action and use your bonus bets on same-game parlays, player props, money line spreads, and more. And if you love the thrill of live betting, DraftKings has you covered with live odds and props bets every single night. So here's your play. New customers bet $5 and get 3 months of NBA League Pass on us, plus get $200 if your bet wins, paid out in bonus bets. Thanks to DraftKings Sportsbook for sponsoring this. Let's make this NBA season one to remember. Note that minimum minus 500 odds are required and the subscription will auto-renew. Sunday night football, we had the Broncos probably beat the Commanders 20-17. Still got a few minutes hanging out in the last of this fourth quarter, but again, got a little bit of an early start here on our recap. We appreciate you guys understanding. But with those Broncos, Dwayne, again, managed to catch the whole first half here. A bit of the, kind of same experience from Bo Nix. On one hand, he'll make a pass to Courtland Sutton for a touchdown where his knee was about an inch off the ground, and remind you that he does have the athleticism and arm talent to make really cool plays like that happen. On the other hand, just how many times can your tight end be wide open in the flat and you still manage to skip the ball to them anyway? So kind of know what we're getting there. It was good to see Courtland Sutton refine the end zone though, because again, really has been a situation where Troy Franklin's been the wide receiver 1 more weeks than not in Denver.
Yeah, for sure. Sutton right now leading the way with 5 targets, but it's Evan Ingram that's got the 8. So it'll be interesting to see the route participation rate for Evan Ingram, because he's a guy that, despite going and spending money on him, getting him in, the off season, like he's just really been stuck in I guess that's the Joker, the joke's on you role, because you're not going to play very much. So we'll see what happens with Evan Ingram. You had Troy Franklin with 3 targets so far tonight, 2 catches for 21 yards. So it was Cortland Sutton really as the wide receiver 1. And honestly, Pat Bryant, he's kind of been making some noise these last few weeks.
Yeah.
He's got 7 targets. So he's actually got more than Sutton or Troy Franklin. I think the big thing here, Ian, that's disappointing about the Broncos overall, look, the Commanders' defense has been pretty terrible, especially over the last 4 to 5 games. So it's not like they're having a bad night. Nix is sitting at 250 passing yards. They got 82 yards rushing, but just feels like a spot where they could have done more. Only 30 yards on 12 carries for RJ Harvey. 2.5 yards per carry. Does have the touchdown, so that's helping. He's got 3 targets, 2 receptions for 15 yards. But RJ Harvey feeling a little more like Woody Marks right now. I'm not trying to put that out there. We know Harvey can be an explosive playmaker, but not happening tonight, man.
My God, dude. I'm just kind of looking at his game log right now. We all remember the 3 touchdown game against the Cowboys, okay? That was awesome, okay? He averaged 6.6 yards per carry. He had the 30-yard touchdown run. That was cool. Here's RJ Harvey's yards per carry, though, in his other 7 most recent games. 3, 2, 0, 2.5, 2.3, 2.7, and then 2.5 again in this one, Dwain. He's been the lead back, and that's cool, but Jaleel McLaughlin, he's been eating into it, and who's to say he shouldn't keep doing so?
Yeah, I mean, McLaughlin's got 6 carries tonight versus 12 for Harvey. So Harvey's still clearly in the driver's seat. He's the guy that they've got the round 2 NFL draft capital tied up in. So my gut says they continue to lean on Harvey. But efficiency, as much as it can be fluky, and it doesn't always mean more or less carries the next week, there are coaches that see this sort of thing that will make changes. We just can't always predict who they're going to be. So yeah, I think it puts Harvey in a little bit of a precarious situation. Although, I mean, I'm not going to overreact at this point, just based on the research that we've done. But yeah, we'd like to see RJ Harvey out here, averaging 5 yards per carry. That's what we were hoping whenever he took over the starting job. Heaven knows J.K. Dobbins was doing way more with his rushing attempts than what we've seen from Harvey.
And the bigger issue, again, that kind of was the issue even when Dobbins was there, is Tyler Bidet continuing to soak up the pass game opportunities. 5 targets in this one compared to just 3 for RJ Harvey. So again, I know we wanted to really have the chance to boost Harvey way up there in the ranks. And not saying he won't be in the top 20 here next week anyway, but certainly would be a lot cooler if he was flirting with higher end efficiency. He will get a chance to take on the Raiders here in next week in week 14. Meanwhile, for the Commanders, led by Marcus Mariota, Dwain, Marcus Mariota has gone out there and made, a few plays happen. Again, he had a horrific interception earlier, in the first half, but, rebounded through a touchdown to Treylon Burks. That catch of the year candidate, man, a fantastic catch by the former Tennessee Titans. So good to see there. But I do think we actually have a realistic chance of getting Jaden Daniels back for week 14. I guess my only question, once Daniels is going to be back in the lineup, is how healthy is that elbow actually? I understand it's on his left side, but is this dude one hit away from just exiting the game? That's my one concern there, Dwayne.
Yeah, or just bracing himself from a fall, whenever he just gets pushed at the end of a play. It is concerning, but he is Jaden Daniels, and we know what the ceiling looks like because we've seen it. You've now got Terry McLaurin back again. Terry McLaurin's got 9 targets tonight, 4 catches for 54 yards. Life against the Denver Broncos can be tough, but nice to see him out there with 9 targets. Zach Ertz leading the way with 10 targets. He's got 8 catches for 84 yards tonight. Deebo Samuel looking dreadful. 2 receptions for 9 yards on 3 targets. He's got 2 carries for -3 yards so far with a couple of minutes remaining.
I know Debo's been a little bit banged up, but man, that really has been a fall. He had the 74 yards and a touchdown against, Miami. So I guess if he goes overseas, he's okay. But that was the only time in his last 6 or 7 games that he actually has cleared even 30 yards out there. Obviously, we're not even getting the rushing stuff to feel good about there anymore. Speaking of that rushing stuff, it sure seems like, man, it was another game where Chris Rodriguez actually was the lead running back. He all actually found his way into the end zone and honestly continues to look good. Bill Krowski-Merritt, fantastic August storyline. I get it. But dude, Chris Rodriguez and even Jerry McNichols, man, who had a really cool first down conversion on like 3rd and 11, where I think the Commanders were even surprised that he picked it up. Like C-Rod and McNichols have been good enough, man, where I don't think that necessarily is a crime that we've seen Bill phased out. But if you did have to put, $1 on one of these running backs down the stretch, Dwain, and hey, they do have those fantasy playoff matchup against the Giants and the Cowboys, which isn't as cool as it looked a couple of weeks ago. But at this point, I still would pick C-Rod.
Yeah, I think we have to. He's got 10 carries tonight versus 4 for Bill, and then there's 4 for McNichols. So essentially he's getting half the work and they're divvying up the rest among the other 2 running backs. Of course, you've got a running quarterback as well in Washington. Marcus Mariota leads the team tonight with 45 rushing yards on his 8 carries. But Rodriguez, like you said, also had the hard-nosed touchdown run from probably 6 or 7 yards out. It was a really good run. Ran over the safety, Brendan Jones, who's a guy that, he tried to get low on him, and he couldn't get low enough. He could not get low enough.
Low man wins, as Abraham Lincoln once famously said. So going to be the Commanders against the Vikings in Minnesota next week. Not exactly a layup matchup, but if there is a way to beat up on the Vikings a little bit, it would be through the ground game. So keep an eye on that. But we appreciate you guys keeping an eye on us for the last 90 minutes. I think a new record for our shortest Fantasy Life recap edition. We appreciate you guys tuning in with us all season long. Rest assured, Dwayne and I are not done recapping this action, though. Utilization report will be out Monday afternoon. I'll have my early week 14 rankings hot off the press over at fantasylife.com for you guys then. So appreciate you as always. If you like the show, then like the show. And yeah, hitting that subscribe button always helps as well. So for Dwayne, for producer Mick, I'm Ian. Thanks again for tuning in. Until next time, take care, everybody.